Unless you're expecting any more guests, get started.
Does it look clear? Okay, should we If you can hear me halfway. You guys are great. So, welcome. Thank you for coming to our presentations. Me, Alex Wessels, David, Moon, and Drew Baker will be giving our presentations today. And we're so excited that you could be here. There are some expectations. We are going to be giving 10-minute presentations each. During the presentation, there is an expectation that your phones will be off and on silent. That we have a video camera going, so nobody needs to take pictures or record any part of the presentation. You can just go see them later. All questions will be during the 5-minute questioning section in between presentation. You don't have to ask questions if you don't need to. Is there anything else I need to add, guys?
Yes, that you don't enter or leave the rooms during the presentation.
That's right. Because of the way this is set up, we're asking for everyone to stay during all 3 presentations instead of leaving and coming back in between. Yeah. So, with that,
Begin. Take it away.
without further ado, Drew Baker.
All right, thank you all for coming here today. For those of you who have chosen to be here of your own free will, I want to say thank you for looking at an independent math engagement on the schedule and saying that that is what you want to see first thing in the morning. So let's get started. My presentation is on independent math engagement, increasing student focus and engagement with independent work. So my focusing question that kind of shaped my whole research was what strategies can be deployed to facilitate productive work and genuine inquiry during students' independent work times in class. As for why? Well, let me give you a bit of my classroom background to begin. I was teaching in a 6th grade classroom at the Untitled Charter School. 6th graders at their best are a pretty wild bunch. So getting 6th graders to sit down and really do that work is a challenge for every teacher. Within my own classroom, even before I had taken over with my mentor teacher, I noticed there was always a lot of classroom noise during these supposed independent work times. And when I took over, that carried over. I was really interested in trying to maximize student performance, and I believed that really finding these good strategies I can use would be one way to very much help how they perform. And I wanted to find some best practices, ways that I could structure independent work times to be best for the students, best for me, and make it interesting and engaging. And then I wanted to maximize students' learning. So here's a quote from an early journal entry of mine that kind of illuminated my thinking as I set out on this. I said, I'd expect there to be a number of effective strategies which, if I conduct my research well, I can hope to find some of. So to illuminate that a little more, my early thinking was really, there's multiple strategies out there that can work. But I was thinking very black and white. Either they're going to work or they're not going to work. I wasn't really thinking there was going to be much in between. And I was really hoping that I might find some best practice out there, some one strategy I can bring in for independent work time that's going to make, you know, the classroom look like that ideal image of what everyone wants their classroom to look like. So a little bit about how I structured my research. I had 3 total strategies that I wanted to test out over the course of 6 weeks. After each strategy, I gave myself a little bit of time to reflect, and then my next strategy choice was going to be based on those reflections, trying to bring in a new strategy that might be a little bit different from the first one. So my first strategy was something called conversion strips. This was during a unit when the 6th graders were learning about doing unit conversions. Now, during this unit, 6th graders might get a sheet that looks something like this, filled with all the unit conversions they would need to use, and they're expected to be able to use this, and then if we asked how many ounces are in 3 kilograms, they'd be able to use that and figure that answer out. The information's on there, however, This is very difficult for some students to use. It's a lot of information to take in at once. These conversion strips were a way of taking those same equations, blowing them up and putting them each on individual strips for them to use, so that to answer that same question, how many ounces are in 3 kilograms, they could just go through their strips, find their first one that says, okay, well I know 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds, and I know 1 pound is 16 ounces, and they can use that now to make those same conversions they needed to make in order to solve that question. So after I had tested this out for a while, the question was, did these conversion strips help? Some pros I observed from it. It definitely helped with student understanding. Not everyone used these, but the ones who did use them did very well on that assessment for this. And their scores improved. Some cons, however, again, it was not designed for everyone. My initial idea was that I wanted to find strategies that would really work for everyone in my classroom, and right off the bat, my first strategy is designed for a small subset of the class to use. Additionally, I was a little concerned that these might actually have been distracting to students, that they might have just taken those strips and used them as something to play with without actually doing the math. In order to try and figure out what students thought about the strips, I designed a little survey for them to get some answers from them. So my first question I had asked was, did you feel that the conversion strips helped you to learn measurement conversions, and how? The students were generally in agreement. They said something along these lines. They said yes, because you'd be able to look at them bigger and side by side. So just like with the example, they really liked the fact that they were blown up bigger. The fact that they could line them up and manipulate them and put them side by side was a major plus of that. The second question, did using the conversion strips make it easier or far harder for you to focus on your work, and why? And again, they said it was easier because you could see it bigger. Kind of cutting out that excess information and just having those strips as a single large one to use and look at made it easier for them to focus. And then the last question, would you recommend other students to use these conversion strips in the future? Well, to put it simply in one word, yes. Yes, they would. So what about the rest of the students? As I thought about my second strategy, I really needed a strategy that would address the whole class. And I wanted to find something that could really motivate students. So my second idea was a homework time incentive. So generally, the homework time incentive, when I built out this independent work set, I'd pick one problem that was kind of my keystone problem. That was really a problem that got at the heart of whatever today's learning topic was in the lesson. The students, however, didn't know which problem that was. The deal was, if they completed that work, brought it up to get checked, and we checked it over, and that key problem, that keystone, was done correctly and done well, we said, great, you understood what we're learning today, you can get started on your homework early. So the question was, did this help? Some pros? This was really popular with the students. The instantaneous feedback was, we love getting to do homework in class, it's awesome. And it was a great incentive. I observed a lot of students putting their heads down and working a lot more during the class time because they just knew there was that possibility that maybe I can finish my homework and not have to do homework tonight. And as a nice kind of added benefit, I found that on-time homework completion actually increased when I was testing this, because it turns out if a student gets even a start on that homework, even if they did one problem in class, they're more likely to go home and finish it and turn it in the next day. Some cons, however, I wondered about the students who work slowly. There were some students in my class who never really got to take advantage of this incentive. And I was worried that maybe this wasn't doing anything for them. Maybe they knew that they were never going to get this incentive, so maybe this was not helpful to them. And also, if I went back to my focusing question at the beginning, there's a definite concern over whether this really fosters genuine inquiry in the students, or whether this is just kind of an extrinsic motivation to get them to do their work. So after two strategies, my thinking was starting to change from what it had been. Maybe it's not finding a single strategy that I need to do. Maybe it's about using multiple strategies at once to address what the students in your room really need from you. So my last strategy kind of came from that idea. I wanted to just try a very different strategy that might help other students who weren't being helped by the first two strategies, which was movement activities. And put simply, that means I'm building in some sort of a movement activity before they're doing their independent work. An example from my classroom was that during our statistics unit, I had them all write down how many pets they have on a piece of paper. Then they got up, they lined themselves up in order, least to most, and we used that to talk about the median number of pets in our room, the mean number of pets in our room, the range of the pets, and some of those basic statistical concepts. This was a great activity because not only did it let them get up and move around, but it also tied into what we were learning. So did these activities help? Well, some of the pros were, it was a great way to let students expend some energy and refocus themselves before they're asked to sit down and do some work. It's a good change of pace as well, just doing something different instead of having students in their seats the entire class. It lets them get up and move around. Some cons, however, you have to worry about whether it's relevant to the material. Sometimes you can make a movement activity that is related, but it's less appealing if your movement activity is just having them get up and play a game for 5 minutes. And time management is a major concern here. It's very easy to lose track of time with these, and then you end up cutting into that work time that was the goal in the first place. So after those three strategies, I had some closing thoughts. What I didn't find was a best practice strategy for independent work times. What I did find were a few different strategies that could help with things such as accessibility, making it so that students could access the material they were trying to do, and therefore would be more likely to continue working on it. Incentivization, giving them some motivation to do the work. And focus, giving them something to get their energy out and stay focused when they're doing that work. I found there's really no silver bullet in terms of independent work time strategies, but instead, it's really a matter of trying to find a set of targeted strategies that meet the needs for your students in your classroom, and understanding that a strategy that works with one set of students might not work with the next set of students. And that finishes my presentation. And we have some time for questions.
So it sounds like as you work through your three options that you moved from, as you put up there, away from the silver bullet, but towards something that looked more like student-centered learning. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say yes. The idea of student-centered learning is definitely kind of wrapped up in that. Yes.
Did you come up with your strategies on your own, or were there things you found through research?
So strategies came through a lot of different inputs. So my first strategy was a suggestion from my mentor teacher based on her experience in previous years, where she noticed that students had struggled with that particular concept. My second strategy was something I sort of came up with on my own, and my third strategy was modeled after the research that another member of the MIT was doing. Yes.
This was very interesting. I was particularly interested in the incentives in the second strategy, and I was wondering if, because as you notice some negatives, those students who work slowly, which of course is something you want to encourage, you don't want students to rush through.
Right.
So I'm wondering if, well, I guess I have two questions. One is, did some students, did you find that students were rushing so that they could have that homework time, and then did you send them back because they didn't actually answer that keystone problem? And then the second question is, did it help you to think of any other strategies for these, or incentives, I should say, for these slower working students?
So the first question was, yes, there were definitely times where a student would come up with incomplete work or not well done or not thoroughly done work, and they definitely did get, there were times where we said, you need to do a little more here, or let me show you this that you hadn't quite done right, and they got sent back to finish it up. The second question kind of gets into some next steps for what I was really trying to do, was finding those other incentives. I was really interested in trying to find more kind of intrinsic motivation and finding ways to work that into independent work time for students. But it's not something I've come up with much of yet, but something I want to continue to work on going forward. Yes.
You said in the beginning that one of the observations you had was a lot of noise during independent work time. Of your 3 strategies, I'm curious as to, was there one of those that reduced the noise level the most?
Notably, I couldn't say for sure. I would say definitely the latter 2 were more effective because both of those got at more of the whole class. The first strategy only targeted a small set of the class, which means the rest of the class was doing what they would normally be doing. I'd like to say the second one, but I didn't record that as an observation, so I don't have official data on it. But the second one, I would say, was probably the most effective at getting them to really put their head down and work. Yes.
So what will you take from your research that you'll implement in your teaching next year?
So really what I'm taking away is this understanding of strategies, the fact that it's not about finding some strategy and repeating that forever for the rest of your teaching career, but knowing that you need to have kind of a vast array of different strategies at your disposal and being ready to adapt to your changing classroom every year, or even in the course of a year if your classroom gets to be different. So yeah, it's a lot about adaptability, building up a set of different skills that I have ready to pull out.
Did your class know you were doing research on that?
Yes, because they were given a survey. They were aware that I was testing out different strategies for teaching. It wasn't explicit research on them, so they weren't terribly self-conscious about it.
Did any of them give you any ideas for teaching strategies?
In the course of this, I did not get suggestions from them. I mostly got feedback on the ones I tried, which is how I knew that like the movement breaks were very popular. Students loved those.
It seems like one of the really good things that happened was that some of the kids at least had a chance to come up and have a one-on-one interaction with the teacher and get immediate feedback on how well they were thinking this through. So just maybe a thought, it would be nice to be looking for ways to replicate that advantage for those students who are slower workers and where they have the same opportunity to come up and get some, not only affirmation that they've done it right, but that's kind of an immediate pat on the back from the teacher, which I think is something that would make them enjoy the classroom experience a lot more. So just something to think about.
Yeah.
Forgive me if you did point at this, but I wasn't clear on which strategy promoted the most student inquiry, would you say?
Student inquiry.
Like actual curiosity.
Oh, so really got more at the genuine.
Yeah. Even surprisingly, maybe from some students. I'm not expecting magic. I'm just curious to know if any of that happened.
Yeah, I would say probably the first one. Despite it being targeted at a smaller set of students, it really helped them to be able to access and do the material when before they might have just sat there. And you know, the common issue is that students who didn't get it, they would sit there until you come over to help them, and then they're just waiting for you to walk them through it. And that gave them a means to really get into it and do it themselves and put their head down and do that work, which produced, you know, more work out of them, and they were doing it independently, which was really the big advantage there.
I have another question with that.
Sure.
It kind of came from what you just said. So when you were talking about noise level, I'm curious to know, were students allowed to use other students as resources in the classroom?
Yeah, I encouraged them to collaborate when I was taking over. My mentor was more interested in really having that quiet classroom, everyone working independently. So we were a little different in our kind of philosophy there. But yeah, noise level for me is that I like noise. I prefer it to be on-topic noise. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much.